Boy, the time flies when you're having fun. We're back again to talk about aviation and anything that springs out of that. Paul Brennan here in Wellington and
Martin Noakes in Wellington.
So, always a lot to talk about. 2 weeks is a long time in aviation, Martin.
Well, yeah, occasionally it is.
Before we get underway, the piece of footage that I've put at the front for the folks watching on YouTube, this is actually quite a rare moment. This is a Air New Zealand 747-200 Classic at Wellington.
Oh, yeah?
It was part of a flyover they did of an All Blacks game.
All right.
You just saw the picture of them going over out the old athletic park. It doesn't exist anymore, but you'll see some pictures here of it taking off and flying around. It was
was it a flyby like SAA does for the Springboks?
Yeah,
games?
it was right over the top. Oh,
Yeah.
not but higher.
Yeah, those SAA guys.
A couple of hundred feet. Yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah, but that. It looks good
Yeah.
when you're down that low. So enjoy that footage while we talk. If you're watching the YouTube version for a few more minutes yet. MH370 still. Well, somewhere. Is it in the Bay of Bengal? Is it in the southern Indian Ocean? Who knows?
Well, they certainly don't.
I can't work this out. You get all these pings. What is it? 38 kilohertz pings for a week. And you nail down the area to a very small area in a huge, vast ocean. And then they just disappear.
Yeah.
And they weren't even consistent while they're looking. They'd come and they'd go.
Yeah.
They couldn't get a fix on it. I wonder why.
Maybe they just didn't have enough boats in the area to nail it.
Maybe.
But they kept up the air search for an awful long time, and you wonder why you'd bother. You haven't seen anything for months. But they kept all these planes flying around. They'd located the pings. Well, they thought they'd located the pings. Turns out they had trouble with the submersibles. Maybe they just don't have enough mini submarines to go around.
Maybe we just assume it's not that, difficult to conduct the sort of search when in reality it's probably
Quite hard.
the hardest thing you'd ever want to do, really.
Yeah, yeah.
But then you get that story about the Adelaide Imaging Company.
Using their team in the Ukraine.
Yeah, which is in the news for other reasons right now.
Yeah. And they reckon they've nailed it down to, the Bay of Bengal. Interestingly enough, it does fit to the northern arc of... Initially, they thought it could have taken two paths,
Yeah.
north and a south, and
Yeah.
they decided on the south based upon the data they had available. Now, this crowd have come up by analysing the photos. They reckon they've managed to identify metals and that type of thing.
But isn't the thing that the images taken a few days before the one that shows some sort of shape that
Yeah,
they have
it doesn't
there?
show anything.
No, nothing there.
Yeah.
And
And,
these
they,
are-
and they say they gave over this information to the search teams, 2 weeks ago? You'd think at this point they'd look into anything. I mean, these guys have got a photograph that shows on one day nothing,
Yeah.
and on another day something. For an extra $1 million, wouldn't you send a ship up there to have a look?
Of course you would.
Well,
I'd consider it.
well, yes.
And wasn't it a fortnight before the thing stopped transmitting that they advised the
Yes,
authorities
yes.
that
So
they had
you'd
this
think
information?
for a small amount of money, a relatively small amount of money, they'd send a ship up there just to have a look, because nothing else they seem to be doing is working.
Where was the oil rig where the guy claimed to see something? Was that in that?
No, that was South China Sea.
That was the other side of the
Yeah.
continent.
Yeah.
See, I always thought that there might be a possibility that it sort of did a huge circle, 180 degrees maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
Just a really wide circle. And that could explain why something could be that north. Do you think an arrogance comes into being with these searchers? That this is our mission. Only we know how to do this. And
Well, and they'll probably be using classic project management techniques and
yes,
so
best
there's
practice.
imagination not required.
And, it's from the Ukraine.
Yeah, I suppose so. There'll be a bit of that. One thing Ukraine is proving is that they are evildoers. So, would you would you take anything?
Who
they
are
say?
the evildoers, though?
They are. They.
They.
Just a general line. Yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't look like this is going to be resolved anytime soon.
No.
And interesting story just related to that we're going to get on to other stuff shortly, but the FAA is asking for 787-8 cockpit oxygen hoses to be replaced, ones that could possibly conduct electricity, and they use one similar to the one that destroyed the Egypt airplane.
Yes.
And we talked about that as a possible
Yes.
thing that could have happened.
It seems these oxygen hoses, the crew oxygen hoses in the cockpit, have got so-called anti-collapse springs running up the inside of them,
Right.
and these conduct electricity, and they suspect that these could be a fire hazard, static electricity, whatever, ignites the oxygen, and as we saw in the Egypt airplane, burns the plane to a crisp within a few minutes.
Well, the captain of that plane is quoted as saying that he expended the entire contents of the fire thing and the bottle and didn't make any difference at all. So that's what you're dealing with there.
And that plane, how many people did it have on it?
Over 300 on board waiting to depart.
Wow.
Actually, yeah.
Good thing it didn't depart.
We try and imagine what could have happened here, and that would have been...
Because there wasn't a lot left of that plane.
No, the whole thing was there, but the whole cockpit was burnt out.
That's what I mean. It was all burnt out.
Yeah. Okay, on to some of the news out there. How's our old mate Qantas doing?
Not great. No surprises there.
Sort of an anniversary has come up.
Yeah, the Emirates takeover of Qantas happened a year ago.
Boy, that year went quick, didn't it?
Yeah, and as we've said...
What do you mean the Emirates takeover of Qantas?
That's effectively what's happened, isn't it?
Ah, okay.
And as we've said all along, it seems to be that Qantas had everything to lose and Emirates had everything to gain. And according to the first year's figures, that's exactly what's happened. There's 11.7% more people went through Dubai this year from Australasia than a year ago.
Oh, February on February.
February on February, yeah.
But there's no mention of any increase at the Australian end.
No.
Yeah.
No, Qantas has been... And as I've told you before, colleagues of mine who live in Australia who fly for business, they try to choose Emirates metal every time.
Right.
Although they're meant to fly Qantas, they'll always just make sure they choose a flight which means that they get onto Emirates planes, because they say the service is better, the planes are better, everything's better.
Well, one of the guys involved in running the Etihad airline, which has got the share in Virgin, he's talking really tough. I just saw a quote before, and he's saying that, Qantas were inept and were a dinosaur. Foot on the throat talk,
Well,
Like, you're going down.
I think, if you look at what's going on, he's probably not wrong. I mean, Qantas they're reducing flights now.
And they're not taking up the new aircraft. They're keeping the old ones on, because we've talked about that before too, those old 76s. They ain't going anywhere. They're not taking on the new aircraft. No. Meanwhile, the other carriers are and becoming more efficient. And, I mean, you can't win anything that way, can you?
No, you can't. It's going to be very interesting to see how they dig themselves out. Maybe they don't want to. Maybe this is all just an elaborate ruse to break the backs of the way the companies run so they can start again.
Yeah, but who's flying the brand? It's all about the brand, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, does it have the brand power that it had?
Well, it's certainly interesting. Aussies are normally staunchly, chauvinistic when it comes to all things Australian, and they're not anymore. A lot of them are flying Air New Zealand. A lot of them are flying Emirates when they get the choice, and it just seems to be that your average Aussie's losing faith in Qantas.
I see some are calling for almost total overseas ownership as the only way to save it.
Yeah.
What's that code for? We need money.
Yeah.
But who would take that over with the labour issues that
nobody
you talk about?
Nobody would. I mean, what they're doing by saying that is it's a scare tactic to try and get the government to give them more money, but the current government's not going to give them more money, that's for sure.
Well, you'd be throwing good money after bad, wouldn't
Absolutely.
you? I mean, they got their hand out the following year and the year after that?
I think the biggest mistake Qantas made would have been, 20 years now, when they were on the industry design committee for the 777.
Yeah.
And they didn't take it.
Oh, why not?
And they should have taken it.
But it's more just than the aircraft, isn't it? It's the way you do things, it's the service, it's the attitude.
Well, on board Qantas is not too bad, but what that would have done had they taken the 777, and the reason they didn't take the 777 20 years ago is they didn't want to fight with the maintenance unions. That's what stopped them. It would have just been too hard. But if they'd had the fight then, it would have been an easier fight to have, because it would have been the sensible thing to do in all ways.
When did they have their last 74s come on? They were in the late 90s, early 2000s, I think, those ERs. So they were still buying 747s when you'd probably have a 300 ER. It's 777.
Yeah, I think Boeing was...
They just went on and bought...
I think Boeing was surprised when Qantas didn't take the 777, because they were seen as one of the leading airlines for the 777.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the perfect plane for Qantas, or would have been the perfect plane for them.
So it's official. They've done better, Emirates, than Qantas.
No surprises there.
And quickly, speaking of alliances, Singaporeans have agreed to the Air New Zealand Singapore thing. So
that's good.
You're going to see, A380...
Apparently, they're going to
come here.
They're going to put an A380 on.
And I see they're taking one out of Australia. Could that be the one? Which means it might not be that far away.
No. So then there'll be what? How many A380s at Auckland?
Well, 4 a day.
4 a day.
Every day.
Wow.
Plus, what? They do a 777 in there.
Still do a 777.
And Air New Zealand are going to Singapore then every day,
So
aren't
they'll
they?
probably be doing a 787 eventually.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, huge amount of seats, but that's all designed to then go South America, isn't it?
to get the
that's
Singaporeans off to South America, yeah.
Otherwise, it sort of doesn't make sense to have that much capacity between the two.
Well, we've spoken about this, and there's been consistent rumours that Air New Zealand are going to open up South America with their new 787s.
But if you've got
But we haven't seen the announcement yet.
If you've got a daily A380, 777-300, and one also into Christchurch every day, I don't know about Christchurch, maybe most days, but every day into Auckland, plus Air New Zealand every day, that's a huge increase in seats.
You're going to have to shift those people somewhere.
It doesn't make sense if it's just between the two countries.
No.
Yeah, so watch that space. Something's going to happen.
It's going to be real handy for Kiwis, again, being able to fly via Singapore, which has always been my preferred Southeast Asian stopover.
Yeah.
And then picking up a Singapore Airlines flight to, 15 cities in Europe?
Going that way.
Yeah, real nice.
And 787-9 from Auckland to wherever in South America. Maybe more than one destination.
That would be...
Would have to be, wouldn't it?
Be quite a good call. You'd get the whole of the Singapore Airlines catchment area in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
If they want to go to South America, that's the way they'd go.
Yeah.
And there must be a lot of people flying to South America.
That's right. Oh, definitely. It's
it
forever growing, isn't it?
And you don't have to go through LA.
Yeah, this is interesting.
Be quicker.
This could be big time.
This could well be big time.
Yeah, and big for the tourism because they stop here.
Yeah.
Nice.
We'll see.
Okay.
And we're still waiting for that announcement from Air New Zealand to what cities are going to fly to in South America.
Well, that will be the key to then how this thing works, right? Right. And of course, Singapore Airlines, that's your territory. That's not our territory.
Yeah.
Anything from there on in is yours.
Yeah.
And of course, by having their flights, Air New Zealand back between Singapore and Auckland, means they have an element of their own control about who they put on those flights to South America as well, right?
Yeah. And of course, you'll have all the Virgin traffic feeding into Auckland to fly onto South America as well.
There you go.
And probably the Etihad, because they're all co-owned. So if you want to buy an Etihad ticket from, let's say, Melbourne to Sao Paulo, you'd be flying Air New Zealand planes from Auckland on.
Yeah.
On an Etihad ticket, though.
Yeah. Way to go.
Quite nice.
We're talking about 777. Anything to update on the X?
Well, yes. So we knew that the Japanese built a lot of the 787, and traditionally they'd also built a lot of the 777. And we were wondering that when JAL bought Airbus, what that would mean for the Japanese aircraft industry. Well, don't worry, ANA has saved the day by ordering a whole lot of 777Xs, and a suitable time frame later, the Boeing company has announced that Japan will, after all, keep its share of 777X production. So I wonder if some politics is involved.
What a surprise.
In there. Yeah, who'd have thought?
It's pretty obvious, isn't it, what goes on there?
Because apparently 40% of the Japanese aircraft industry is based around building parts for the 777 and the 787.
40%? Well, that's huge.
It is huge.
So without this, they don't have an industry pretty well.
Basically, so ANA was probably lent on a bit.
Do they get guarantees of performance that will be made up by, either the company, Boeing, or the government, Japanese government, if it doesn't turn out right, to offset any loss they might have in their business plan from the stated efficiencies, or do they just wear that?
Well, I think ANA just got told to buy 777.
Well, they get told.
I'm pretty sure they got a pretty good price.
Okay.
That's how they would have done it.
That manufacturing would be part of an offset.
Yeah.
I mean,
and let's face it, the 777X is going to be a great plane, so I don't think ANA is too disappointed. But
right.
Boeing was saying we're going to remove all manufacturing from Japan, and then ANA order a whole bunch of planes, and we'll leave your share.
They blink.
Yeah, we leave your share intact.
That's still years away, though. 4 years away,
at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the 9X is 2020.
Remember last program, we were talking about the possible A322.
Yeah.
There's been a bit of talk about getting more out of the A321, almost to what we were talking about, like A322,
in fact,
240 seats now or something?
In fact, one of the websites actually did mention that Airbus's response to a 757 RS, as they called it, or a refresh, would be an A321 with a new wing and engines called the A322, which is exactly what we said.
Yeah, there you go.
I reckon they're copying us. But anyway.
Serendipity.
So, yes, the current A321 takes 220 people.
Ah, that's right.
The A321 NEO takes maximum 236, but they reckon they can rearrange some of the interior and get another 4 people in, so that takes it to 240.
Yeah.
So 240 people for 6,700 kilometres, which is the range of the A321 NEO. You've pretty much got a 757.
Well, that's like 98%, 99% of the missions covered.
Yeah.
Even transatlantic.
Yeah.
Possibly, which is what...
Or Ireland to Boston, places like that.
Yeah. Because, 75 still goes a bit further than that.
It does go a bit further
about 4,000 miles.
Yes. So this is about
range.
300 miles off the current range of the 757.
So that's all they've got to make up now.
All they've got to make up. And
they'll probably do that.
Yeah, but as people have pointed out, it's like 98% of... There's very few 757 routes make use of all the range.
What about those American carriers, though, with hundreds of them? They're mostly domestic machines, are they? Or in the Americas?
And, regional. Well, if you include Middle America and places like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But they do like to send them off to, Manchester and...
They do.
Places like that.
And the A321, from the top of the northeast of the States, will still make that.
Yeah.
So, the reason Boeing's not making a 757 is because essentially there already is one.
Yeah.
That's why it won't happen.
But for them, I mean, they had it.
Yes.
But they would have had to have gone back to the drawing board anyway.
Yeah, it's a massive plane.
Yeah.
The 757 is a great looking plane, one of my favourite looking planes actually. But if you stand that next to an A321, it looks almost double the size.
Yeah.
But it's certainly much heavier, doesn't carry much more people, has a long range, but has to lift all that fuel and everything, so they can't be very efficient.
No. I was thinking, we were talking about these NEOs and those engines that are going on, like the A321 NEO. What's that, up over 30,000 pounds?
33,000 pounds.
Okay. Now, what's the A340, up around...
31 to 34.
So...
There's 2 engine types.
Is there a case for a NEO A340?
Take an old A340 300 and strap new geared turbofans on it.
Totally.
Yeah.
It has the height off the ground.
Well, yes, because that does have the height off the ground, because initially that wing was designed with enough clearance for unducted fans.
Well, there you go.
Which then failed to get produced, and so they ended up putting hairdryers on the wing.
Yeah, so what are you talking about in terms of a gain? It's what, about 10 to 15%?
Oh, it'd probably be more than that. Yeah, 17, 18 even.
See, that gives you a low-cost airframe.
$30 million, you'll pick up an A340, 300.
Maybe even a bit less.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So
$30 million for the engine. So let's say for under $70 million, you'd have a plane with the most efficient engines currently on the market.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not bad.
You'd probably have a plane that would be as cheap to run as a 777-200.
Interesting.
It is interesting.
Okay, couple of news items. Do you see that video of the 146 out of Perth with the sparks coming out? I think the inboard left-hand engine. One of those light combing turbofan thingies. Helicopter engine.
Which is a geared turbofan, by the way.
Oh, there you go. Speaking of which.
Yeah.
Quite dramatic, but they put it out in 3 other engines.
Yeah.
I read somewhere they can fly on 1 engine, those things.
Really?
1?
Nah.
Just minimise your descent, perhaps.
Yeah, you just choose where you're going to crash.
They've always been referred to as, 4 hair dryers flying in formation or something.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I've always liked flying on them, though.
They were really smooth.
The Swiss called them, or Crossair, called them the Jumbolino.
They were the whisper jets here.
Okay.
There was a problem, though, with those engines. They had a few, thrust rollbacks unexplained.
Yeah.
And I think they were limited on altitude or certain conditions.
And they also put quite a lot of fumes into the cockpit.
They were well
stinky. Known for that. And they're interesting because certainly the early versions of that engine were reverse flow. The air went in the front, because you had the fan. It went into the front of the engine and then turned around, and the combustors were facing the other way, and then it got exited out the back again.
Crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's a helicopter engine. So.
Well, that's right. Yeah. I've flown in the cockpit of one of those things on a freighter, actually, Ansett freighter.
Glass cockpit, right, with little 4-inch screens.
Yeah. The sort of early EFIS.
Yeah.
Okay, and there was also a report of Asiania 767 flying on for, what was it?
4 hours.
Yeah, on 1 engine?
Well, no.
Or reduced thrust on?
Well, apparently not, no. So an oil warning light came on, and this light, when it comes on, means divert,
Right.
because you've got contaminated oil supply.
Ah, okay.
And they decided not to divert and flew on for 4 hours
With the engine going.
with the engine going.
Oh, and it was inspected, and they found a whole lot of metal
They had to
shavings
replace
in
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the pilots look like they're going to face disciplinary action and possibly going to be fired. But as some people have pointed out, yes, that's fine. That solves the problem with that captain. But what is the problem with the airline?
And that's Asiania. They were the people who had the crash at San Francisco.
Yes.
Another airline has a 787 first flight. Found this nice bit of footage for those watching on the YouTube version. Martin, Air Canada's 7878.
Nice looking, or the duck egg blue, or
I
whatever
quite
it
like
is.
that colour.
Do
But
you?
it's just when it gets dirty, though, it looks horrible.
Yeah, it looks French.
But when it's new, it's quite, well, it has that sort of polar feel, doesn't it?
No, that's a very nice looking plane. I mean, that 787 is a cracking looking plane
Yeah.
anyway. I mean, the Jetstar one looks very, very
Right.
nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, Canadians.
Yeah, there they are. Canadian A.
Hey, Canadian E.
Have you seen Anchorman 2?
I have.
We're Canadians.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And they're always apologising.
Well, what are the Canadians are to the USA? What Kiwis are to the Aussies? Eh?
Yeah, I guess. Hey. And Martin, aircraft of the day today is, well, how would you describe it?
Science fiction, classic 60s.
But only just.
Yeah. Oh, I suppose development would have taken place in the 50s, mid-50s and on. Because in those days they used to spit out advanced jets in about 6 years. Now it takes about 30.
We're talking about an aircraft that came out of the famed Skunk Works
Yeah.
in California from the drawing boards of, well, led by Kelly Johnson, the famous designer, Lockheed designer. We are talking about the
The A-12.
A-12. Would we call it the forerunner to the famed SR-71?
They overlapped a bit, but yes, they would be. The A-12 was, I guess, kind of the development version of the pre-development version of the SR-71.
Right.
Once they found out what they really wanted to do.
Primary customer, the Central Intelligence Agency. Operated by the Air Force, though, of course.
Yep.
And all the testing done at Area 51. See how legends are born?
Yep.
They look pretty spacey, don't they?
Yeah, wow, that would have...
And you got astronauts flying them.
Yep. Yeah, they were considered astronauts, yep.
So we're talking about an aircraft with phenomenal performance.
Yes. Service ceiling 95,000 feet.
Whoa.
Yeah, the maximum speed is Mach 3.35, which is 2,210 miles an hour
Gosh, that's getting along.
for the A-12.
Yeah. And I was reading that the A-12 also had quite a high attrition rate. They lost,
They lost out of 15, they lost 5.
Wasn't there a drone that fitted on the back of it?
They did have a drone, it was called the M21.
Yeah.
It sat on a pylon between the two vertical stabilizers. And it was an autonomous drone that was designed to be flown off the mothership, so to speak, fly a predetermined course, and then eject its canister of film in those days. Of course, they're still using film. The drone would then fly off and self-destruct, and the canister would be plucked out of midair by a C-130.
Self-destruct.
They ended up cancelling that, but it would have been pretty wild had it worked.
I think the Museum of Flight in Seattle has a A-12 with the drone.
With the drone still on top.
Or maybe it's just the drone. I can't quite remember. I went
Okay.
there, but it's either both or the drone. I had a look over, and I know you have too, an SR-71 at Tucson, Arizona, and they're very impressive machines.
Yeah, I've seen it in Washington, D.C. They've got it inside.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, you know,
but it's interesting that we had different takes on it. You're surprised how big it was,
yeah.
and I was kind of surprised how small it was.
Well, 60, what is a 63-ton max weight
It's a big
takeoff?
plane for 2 people, but I thought it would be bigger because it, flew Mark 3, or this was an SR-71, what I saw. It flew Mark 3 at 85,000 feet for sort of 3,000 miles. I thought it would be vast. But obviously it's very efficient on those very, very clever engines that it had. Once they got up to height and speed, that inlet spike, to all intents and purposes, essentially was the engine. They shut down the turbojet in the middle. The spike compressed all the air and ran it in pipes that bypassed the turbojet to the combustors. So it was a kind of ramjet, and there was very little computer control. The pilots had a lever to control those spikes, and pressure gauges that were showing them the optimum pressure within the engine, and a temperature gauge out front. There were some electronics to help them, but they weren't very good, and every now and again, especially at low level, it was quite a common thing for the engine to so-called backfire. It was a surge, but apparently it would yaw the plane through 25 degrees when one of those engines surged, and then the pilot would get on and jiggle a few levers and get things going again, and and off they go. So I was surprised that it was as small as it was. But still, yes, it's a substantial aircraft, and it looks great. It also looks smaller, of course, because this whole thing's a sort of burnished matte black.
Yeah, I noticed that. It's a titanium metal, I think, the whole skin, isn't it? They always leaked. I remember reading that.
Yeah, they only sealed up when they were at speed.
Yeah.
And the fuel, you could put lit matches in it. It wouldn't burn.
Yeah, they had a special tanker, didn't they, fleet for that?
Yeah, special fleet of tankers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't the record coast to coast 58 minutes?
It's amazing, isn't it, eh? And that was a dogleg to not fly over built-up areas.
Yeah, incredible. Hard to believe it's 51 years ago, though.
Yes.
Boy.
And it's hard to believe they've stopped building stuff like that. They, of course, in conspiracy.
Oh, the same day as the last day we were talking about?
No, those were the evildoer days.
Oh.
These are the good evildoer days.
All right.
I get a bit mixed up.
These are the people who are going after the they.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
with these... Well, yeah, of course. Did they stop at the SR-71? People still go out to Area 51 on those planes from Las Vegas? Something's still going on out there?
Well, there have been those very interesting 2 photographs recently taken of very high-flying triangular-shaped aircraft.
The greeny thing.
Yeah, and they've both got different planforms, and none of them match the B-2 in terms of angles and this and that. And so
Yeah.
people are saying, geez, what's that? And they were high, and they've worked out from how high they think they were that these things were pretty big. Yeah.
51 years later, right?
51 years later, I tell you what, it's probably powered by unicorns.
That'll appear now you've said it, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, someone's on the Photoshop right now. So, the A-12 is the airplane of the day. 51 years ago, I think last week or was it the week before, it first flew. And there's still, I think, some in a few museums around the place. All right, so that's about it. We've whipped through a lot of stuff.
We have.
Plenty happening, and more will happen. We'll cover it again in our next program. Good to see the numbers going up.
Yeah.
Doing well on the YouTube.
Doing well on the iTunes.
Yeah, exactly. And, of course, locally on the Hut Radio. So it's all good.
Yeah.
All right, from me, Paul Brennan, it's goodbye. See you soon. And
Me, Martin Noakes. See you later.